Funerals are for the living, not for the dead. Consequently, the way that a body is handled is a respect for those people who survive that person, not that person himself. And because we are a society, we set up a bunch of rules and codes of how we will deal with these things.
Eyes on Longmont, offering a diversity of topics about our community that will inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy this edition of Eyes on Longmont.
Just like I live my life wholly, I have a right when the time has come for me, I should gracefully leave the body and go without feeling any bad thing or without feeling any fear. I should leave. That leaving process should not be blocked by wrong understanding of the doctors or sometimes the relatives or sometimes people around. Their attachment, their clinging on to that individual may block that moving away process. That should not be done. And all the people has to be told that, okay, so many hours are left. If there is any conversation, if you want to say something, if you want to tell the dying person something, if you want to listen to what the dying person has to say, that sort of a conversation should be allowed to go on between the family members and the dying person. That is one time when tremendous amount of healing can take place. Healing. Lots of things can be forgiven and forgotten between whatever happened in life. So that is a very beautiful, nice last moment that the soul is departing. The soul forgets and forgives himself and anything wrong it may have done. The other members also forgives and forgets any wrong thing that they may have done to the soul or the soul may have done in the physical body. So let that healing time be given to the dying person and the relatives.
Being alive in this state, in this stage of the process, seems to be quite delightful. We're in a very sensual world of senses, and because we don't know what the other stages are in any kind of scientific way outside of faith, we rather like being in this particular state. This part of the stage. It's like being on a journey and you stop at, you see a roadside attraction and you stop there and you want to stay longer. So, well, maybe we can stay overnight here, and then it goes on instead of getting to the goal and the destiny, you know. So that's I think kind of why we do that. And when we have fears, we do the things like flight, or sometimes we want to fight back. I think Elizabeth Kubler-Ross brought that up in her 5 stages of death and dying, the responses that people have in sort of the various things like bargaining and denial or acceptance or anger. Those are all going to be our natural responses to this, because we've stopped at the roadside here. I think it's hard for people to imagine the whole cycle, the whole process, because we're here in this present moment.
Several years ago, when my daughter was 9, she died of cancer. My oldest child. I also had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old at the time. And throughout my daughter's illness, she died of a very rare form of cancer. We knew that she would die. The doctors even told us when they diagnosed her. But they said, you can either fight it or you can just let her die. Well, of course you fight it. You fight for your child's life. You do anything you can, and we did everything. And it was hard, but she was so filled with a childlike faith that she kept count of how many doctors versus how many pastors came to see her, because I was in seminary and lots of my friends would go visit her. She would do things like say to the doctor, could you not do that procedure yet? Just stop. I need to say a prayer. And not only would she say a prayer, she would fold her hands and say it out loud. How many of us grown-ups would do that?
There was a man who was very well known in town, And I wasn't well, and I didn't want to do the funeral. And there was a man in the synagogue who pressed me into doing this funeral. And he said, I don't want you to give a eulogy. I want everyone to speak. And I'm always a little nervous when you allow everyone to speak, because you never know what someone's going to say. And this room was filled, and people knew him, and they loved him, and they told all sorts of stories about him. And for the mourners, it was so affirming that there were so many people who knew him in so many different ways. And only someone who knows someone in a personal way can tell a funny story or a good story. And so in that way, I think that there is such a thing as a celebration of life at a funeral. But I think that there are multiple valences of feelings, and that they should be respected. A mourner shouldn't feel like they have to be happy.
And when they told us that she was going to die, I asked her on the way home, "Are you afraid?" And she said, "Well, no, Mom, I have my Bible verse." And her Bible verse was, "Do not be afraid, for I am with you always." I felt pretty small that she's had that faith. And towards the end, as she got weaker and weaker, she said to me, "I'm not afraid to die, but I'm kind of worried about you guys," meaning her parents and her siblings. And "I'm worried about you guys, but you know Jesus, so you might be okay." And I said, "We'll be okay. We'll be all right." I didn't want to add worry to her. And she kept visiting with people, and then towards the end of her days, she would hold my hand, but she would only hold one hand. And she was very weak. She wanted that other hand open. And I said, and other people would come in, and she wouldn't let go of me. And I said, "Claire, people want to give your hand to squeeze, give you a little hug." "No, I need that hand to be open for Jesus." 9 years old, I need that hand to be open for Jesus.
The last moment of the death, the moment of the death is considered very, very important, because at that moment, a life's review is going on in the mind of that individual. So that individual must be allowed to be at peace, to go through that life review, and then think out what is the change it will like in its future journey. So that time, if he is kept undisturbed and allowed to peacefully go through that dying process, it is good. Now, if somebody dies of a bomb blast or a thing, that is an entirely different situation. That is not under his control. But when a thing is under the control, then that person should be allowed to die a peaceful death.
And then we grab this phenomena in our palm so tight for so long. And even my fingernails are growing through my palm, like that long I have grabbed. Now I'm even having my ache here. Then I think there's some problem. I'm kind of keep fixing this problem, but I'm not looking at where is this problem coming from. Actually, it is coming from my very hard grip. Is that right? Hard grip. So now, how can I open this grip? Then there are many different kind of subject came. One, I should open my grip with my own finger open, or I should trick myself to open it. In fact, I am not holding anything, but I am thinking I am holding something very important which might lose from me. So then I have to teach myself I have nothing. So then the subject coming, emptiness. When we talk often emptiness, people often take it, it is very cold subject, but actually it is a very profound trick to ourselves that we grasp so hard, especially those objects what we are holding right now is my own home, my credit card, my whatever land, property, car, and so on, my family. So these are like kind of we are holding and very tight. Then from there tightness. We have the stress and anxiety and fear is all coming from here. That how tight we hold, that much we have the pain. So how can we relax? We often say, relax. It won't relax. First we have to recognize you are holding nothing. For then there are so many different methods of proving these phenomena does not exist. There are so many ways to analyze and impress ourselves.
I have some ideas of what I would like, but that doesn't really matter to me. What matters to me is the people that are left behind. So at that point in my life, or even now, I've had long discussions with my family, whether like it or not, about kind of what I want, but mostly trying to get from them what they want. Do they need some place where they can go on a regular basis to talk to a headstone? Do they need to have an ability to have cremated remains where they can carry me around or travel with them if they're not going to stay in one local area? That's really important to me. Is it important to them if they see me or if they don't see me? So really, I am open to what my family and what my loved ones want, because it's really them that have to deal with the situation when the time comes.
The soul which has now to move on in its onward destiny, that soul remains magnetically pulled down to the lower plane by my mourning and by my grieving. The more I grieve, I am grieving as a selfish person for my loss, and I am doing an injustice to that soul. So a wise person should not grieve. The wise person should do the duties towards the body. The last rite should be done properly. Thereafter the soul must be allowed to move on for its grieving is bad. Sadness, a little lost feeling, a little crying, weeping for a few days, that is okay, that is our human need. But grieving continuously is definitely, decidedly not an act of wisdom. It hurts the other soul. It is selfish in nature. The person is grieving for his own loss and pulling the soul back to his, not allowing the soul to move on. We should not do. No grieving.
When she first died, I experienced my daughter all the time. I experienced her in ways that I didn't expect. And I realized that I experienced her as light. My daughter who passed away's name was Claire. And when I named her Claire, I didn't think about it, what it means, but it means light. And my daughter and son actually helped me. If you ever want to understand, talk to children. They helped me so much, because when we went to scatter her ashes, they said, I just saw her. And that was the first kind of thought of that. And I said, no, you didn't see her. I did. And they talked about the way the light came through the trees and the mountains and that shimmer. And it didn't make sense. There was a shimmer where they saw that. And so we started to then kind of look for Claire's shimmer, Claire's light in our world. And we started to see that actually as light. And then we started thinking about who she had been and her goodness and the way she cared for people. And we started to look for opportunities to see how people were acting in the world in Claire-like ways, including ourselves. And so for us, it was about her essence and a spiritualness of that essence. And I don't see that as often as I used to. And I miss that.
You know, one of the interesting things is the medical community says that every human being needs oxytocins. So the human touch creates oxytocins from your hippocampus that gives you the feeling of love and belonging and to the group. So even a dead body can do that. Even a spouse or a child or a grandchild touching the deceased gets touched. And that excites this chemical, oxytocin, to be released into their bodies from even a dead person. And that's how that happens to us. So, and that lets us know we belong. There's a connection. There's something still happening here. It's not like a door is closed. The door is opened. I find that interesting. People don't think about that.
When you eat food and then it goes to digestion, that's how you glow. You see, if you don't digest it it will be constipation. So when these emotions are rising, those emotions are usually coming from our near ones, dear ones, family and friends. So like my friend, best friend, usually gives me these emotions. One day I meet you and you will hurt me. Maybe you will act something. You maybe say something that will hurt me. And that emotion remain here. What should I do? And the next day I will meet you and you will do the same thing. Again, 2, 3, 4, packed. My hard drive is packed. So what should I do with these memories? I don't have any more space. So either I dump on you, that will make the same problem in you. You are also the same victim like I am. So whether you dump on me or I dump on you, we both will struggle. So we will fight for all our life with this. So now this memory is full, so we have to delete them. So with a peacefully deleting, is that what I am talking to you? That when we digest them, like with this wisdom, and then those are the real food, though the dissolution is the real food which actually give us the natural love and compassion.
I found that when I'm attending a death, and I've been called by the family, hospital or home, I try to engage the family in all of that immediate stuff, like speaking into their ear, kissing them, hugging them, actually engage people in those little rituals. And it's all those things that we do while we're waiting for the body to be taken away. And when it be, so maybe that's the moment, I guess, when the body moves from its connection, its relationship to us, and the body then moves on to this next state where it gets disconnected, and that's a cultural thing purely. I try to get people involved in that.
The grandchildren and grandma, who's the one that passed away, spent a lot of time coloring. That was her pride. She was an artist, and she constantly brought them markers and crayons and coloring books, and that's what they did together, especially since she was ill towards the end of her life. So today we got a casket that was made of wood, and the grandchildren had a box of her permanent markers, and they drew all over the casket. This afternoon they'll be writing letters on balloons and letting them go at the cemetery as a way to say goodbye to grandma as well. And I think both of those things are really important, especially since the children had a hard time knowing what to do for the grandkids because they just are so young, they don't understand. And how do you help kids mourn? Well, you get creative, you have to make custom decisions. I had a family member ask me the other day how her child will understand that mom isn't cut in half. And that's something that we don't think about. We're adults, we see the full picture. But children are very little and they don't see the full picture. So you have to, maybe in that case, show them. Say, hey, look, this casket opens up all the way and see, there are her feet, right? If you tell them that mom had bad genes, are you going to scar them for life so that they never wear jeans ever again? Because they don't know what you're talking about. You know, if you say things like, you know, they went to sleep and never woke up. Wouldn't that be terrifying if you were a little kid to go to sleep again? Because you don't know. There's not enough explanation there, and children really need details. They really need to know what's going on. So use real words. Tell them that the person has died. Tell them whatever your spiritual beliefs are. If they're in heaven with the dog or the goldfish, then that's a great way to do it. Also, it's really important to show them your emotions. So don't play it tough the whole time because maybe they want to cry, and if they see you playing it tough, maybe it shows them that they can't. And also telling them that it's okay to be happy and to laugh. They don't have to sit and cry over grandma for the next 6 weeks. But they might think they have to because you are. So it's okay to tell them that they can still play and be happy.
So when people from my congregation ask me, what should I do upon my death? I say, what do you feel you're comfortable with doing? And that's where we usually leave it, because it's really what they it's what you're planning now, because afterwards I don't think it matters. Or we might talk about, what does your family feel about that? What would be easier for your family? What's the best way of honoring their wishes? And so as I have conversations with people about their death and what they want to do with their body afterwards, or people say, well, I'd like to give it to science. Can I do that? Of course you can. Wonderful. Methodism has long been about education and development and understanding things. Even our founder, John Wesley, yes, do that. Can I donate organs? Of course. And then the question always is, are you sure? Because on the second coming, I want to be sure I can get my body back together. Well, it doesn't really matter. What if you died 1,500 years ago and were buried all whole and together? What's left? It's the same thing. And so yes, if you believe all things are possible in God, it's not going to matter what happened to your physical body here on earth.
I think that when people come into the funeral home, they see their brother there, they're responding to that physical presence of the body as if it were, in fact, it is still their brother in their mind and heart. And so a lot of those same feelings will be present to them. And while they want to act on them, I think our culture does a lot of things to stop people from acting on those feelings. We even restrain ourselves sometimes from crying to be strong, that whole myth of men don't cry or that kind of thing. It's very strange. It's only part of our culture. The Latino culture, during the month of November, they'll think nothing of going to the cemetery, having a supper, leaving food for the dead, pouring tequila over the headstone, drinking tequila while out there. This is not a problem. I've had Latino funerals, even after the funeral director has done everything, they'll take pictures of the great-grandchildren, just to say, well, later on in life, see, you were there when your great-grandpa died. You see, we have the picture. So I've been at funerals where the whole family gathers around the coffin and casket, and there's a photo taken. This body in there is still part of the family,
The Vajrasattva is the deity of purification. And then when we cremating, that first we are making this fire with lots of ritual. And then we are inviting that deity as a form of fire. That fire is not any ordinary fire, we believe at that time. We believe that fire itself is the Vajrasattva deity, purification deity. So then we wash this body and we prepare as a very much like a meal, and we kind of offer this body into that fire. So while this fire is consuming, we are believing it is purifying. While the fire itself is consuming, that consuming itself is like a washing, cleansing, manner of cleansing, purification of all those negative karmas of the past. So then in the end, it will all the way dissolve into the space, which is beautiful, like our body dissolving into the space. So when this body dissolving into the space, what is that space at that point is we call the highest quality of enlightenment, which is Dharmakaya. The Dharmakaya, we kind of believe that person is enlightened as a Dharmakaya.
People will say, I'm staying alive. I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. I'm going to stay alive until so-and-so gets married. It might be next summer. And they will actually will themselves into it. That power of will shape then that whole long dying trajectory in ways. If some people just have a stronger will than others. It's the inner power of life. We actually do that. I've seen people will themselves to die. They will tell their family, I'm dying now, and die.
As far as the person who has left this body behind, the soul which has left the body behind, for that soul the body is of no value. It has taken its work from the body, it has discarded the body, and the body is of no value to that soul. But if that soul desires that after I have discarded my body, if my body's organs can do good to somebody else, then that person, if he writes down and gives his opinion like that, then the organs of the body which have still not decayed, still in a functioning form, those organs can be used for the benefit of anybody else. But if that person has not desired like that, then that body must be treated very nicely. It is not for that soul, it is for our thing, that this body which was an instrument for so and so soul, must have been my mother or my father or my relative, I must learn to respect that body. So now how do we show respect to that body? We clean the body after the body has been declared death by the doctors. We will take the body out, we will clean the body, sprinkle water, put a beautiful sheet of white cloth around it, put flowers to respect that body. The body had been an instrument for somebody. To show respect, I put flowers, incense, I chant mantras, I can sing devotional songs, and that body should be respected. Then in our tradition, before the sunlight, before the sun sets, when it is still daylight, the body must be cremated, properly cremated, and then the ash that is left, that ash is generally in our tradition sprinkled in the holy Ganga or holy rivers. The ash is sprinkled because that ash also plays a role in purifying the river water. It has got some medical benefit. So that is why it is sprinkled in the holy rivers, because the holy rivers will become more holy, more clean, more pure with that sprinkling of that ash. That is the science with which we do it.
When I pass away, if my loved ones come and see me in a casket or even just on a dressing table, it's still on some level me. It was my persona and who I showed them, and I try very hard with the families that I work with to make sure that they bring in clothing or makeup or show me a hairstyle that really is fitting of the person who's passed away. You know, if someone worked every day of their life in jeans and a t-shirt and their favorite t-shirt was a Beatles shirt, well then I'm not going to put them in a suit, especially if they never wore a suit. So on some level, you're really trying to keep that person them, even though maybe their spirit or whatever affiliation or belief system that their family might have, you know, if there is no longer a spirit and they're somewhere else, then yeah, that person isn't there, but their persona is, and how we remember them is still there.
At a memorial service, when families come together and begin to share who they've lost, the family member that's no longer there, they begin to tell stories, and somehow I may not know Uncle Bob's story, but when I hear his story, it adds to the story I know, and as that story grows and grows, we all grow together, and that's where I see that kind of collectiveness.
It's this lovely elderly Latino couple. He was dying in the hospital in the morning. He had like, I don't know how many children, 10, 12 children. He got up out of the bed and danced to a one of those ranchero kind of songs, you know, in waltz time with his wife Anne, and they just danced in the hospital room. And he hugged and kissed her, and he said goodbye, and he laid down and died. Well, this is amazing, because here's this body that it's seamless. It's just between the dancing and the dying. You know, it just flows right into one another. He made it so effortless, and the way he used his body to show his affection back. So and then the family crowds around, and you know, there's something there. It's not just that the spirit leaves. There's also this body that's there. That's still an object of love because of its identity, because of its humanity, because all the stories are connected with it, and it still has its senses, in a sense, because that's what people are doing. They're using their senses to respond to the body's senses. There's communication.
I was at a funeral for an old woman who had Alzheimer's, and her daughter, who had visited her every day, she was quite old, and so her daughter was pretty old, visited her at one of the nursing homes here in town, used to sing, I can't remember the name of the song or the song itself, but it was a 1940s or 50s song. She used to get her mother up to dance and sing these songs. And at the funeral, she insisted that we all sing something about so-and-so with the googly eyes. And you know, it's not part of our tradition, but it was so true to this mother-daughter relationship, and it also was funny. And it comforted this woman who had lost her mother. So I think there are a lot of aspects of a funeral.
Sometimes we have a family member who passes away who says, I'm not a believer, and I don't want any of that religious stuff at my service. And I don't even want a service, really. I don't need all that. I'm gone, I don't believe. But other people in the family do believe and are strong believers. How do you honor both of those? How do you honor the person's wishes who has passed on, and how do you honor the need, really, the spiritual needs of those who are remaining? Some people say, well, it doesn't matter, they're gone, so who cares, we'll do what we want to do, but that's not honoring. And so what I've done in those situations, and I've done funerals where we have that happen, is I am cautious of religious language about the person who died, but I use prayers and words of religious comfort for those who are remaining. And I think that's a way of combining the two. This person doesn't want me to talk about they went to heaven. That would, they don't want to say he's crossed over to the great, that's not who he is, that's not who she is, but the family needs for me to say to them, God is walking with you in this time, holding you, giving you peace and comfort.
It was an Irish wake I went to in Chicago. I was invited to the home to pray, and I didn't understand. This would have been about 1980, 81, that the body was going to be there. I know I was invited to pray with the family the night before Mass. And I got there and I got introduced to people and got sat down at the kitchen table, and then dawned on me, they were eating and drinking and talking and laughing, and the guy sitting there was the body, was sitting there at the kitchen table with everyone else, and being offered Jamesons and food. Like, this is just what we do, It's like surrealistic in many, many ways. I suppose that's what they mean by an Irish wake, I guess. And perhaps in an older culture, people actually did that. I was pretty stunned, actually, at first. Like, oh, this is very different.
One funeral that was very inspiring to me was not particularly a Jewish funeral. It was in an Episcopalian church, and the man was Episcopalian. The man who died was schizophrenic, and he was an incredibly talented cook, and he had served, Frank Sinatra used to come to this hole in the wall, which was his restaurant, an amazing cook, but a lot of the time he wasn't there. And his brother was also an amazing cook, but he always acknowledged that his brother was the lead cook, the lead visionary cook. And this man lived in many different worlds. And because of that, he had many different people in his life. And sometimes he thought he was Jewish. And we would have long conversations with each other. And so when they prepared his funeral, they asked people, all these different people from different parts of his life, who were different parts of his head, to come together to remember him. And what that did was it took a man his mind was in lots of pieces and made it whole. And they asked me to participate in the funeral. I chant because he thought he was Jewish sometimes. So I chanted some Jewish prayers, which was also an awesome experience for me.
So no grieving is required, no sadness is required, When I die, I don't go, I just merge in this place only. The higher dimension is not out in space, the higher dimension is here only. And a dead person, just I have to think in my mind and the dead person will be close to me. I don't see that person, that's all. My physical eyes cannot perceive that astral body of a soul. So I can't see, but I can definitely feel the dead beings alive here, absolutely. And they don't go anywhere, they're all here. My dead relatives, they're all here. My physical eyes are not being able to see them, but I can still feel them in my heart. I think of them, I pray to them, I will be able to feel their energy around me.
In the 15 years that I've been in ministry, I don't know how many funerals I've presided over, probably 400, maybe more. My first year as an associate pastor, the church I served had 90 funerals and I did 50 of them. Everyone chose to die the week the senior pastor was out of town, every time he'd leave. And I did a lot. They started to call me the funeral queen. And I thought a lot about that, and it sounded kind of funny and not a good thing, but I realized it was an honor to be involved in families' lives in that point. And so I've done all kinds of funerals in all kinds of places, and I've done interesting ones and the normal standard kind. And what I learned is everyone is just as important.
How does this death in the hospital, what did that do to me? All this attending people day after day, shift after shift of being a chaplain. It really enhanced my appreciation for life, for living. It gave me an understanding that death was not final. It enabled me to be with family during very intimate and tender moments that are uncommon in family lives. It convinced me of a number of things about the truths of my own faith and religion and our ancient beliefs.
Sometimes we want to find answers to death that are applicable to everyone and that everyone will understand no matter what their faith tradition was or their lack of faith tradition, because that's another piece for some folk. So how do we bring all of that together and say, here's the universal truth about death. Here's the universal truth of what happens to us after we die. And I think that there isn't a universal answer that would work for each person. But to try to bring that together, I would say that what brings you and your family peace as you understand death? Does it make sense somehow for you? Under the advice of your spiritual leader, of people you know, of the community around you, what brings peace? And I think that that's the universal in death, is the nextness. And for some people there is no next. It's over and done and that's it. But for most of us, I believe there's something that we're searching for because we want to see a continuity, a journey. And as we look for that journey, maybe that's our universality, is just wanting to know. And to look for an answer of saying my way is right and yours is wrong doesn't bring a sense of peace. It brings great dialogue, and I engage in that dialogue and enjoy it and learn from each other's traditions, but what makes sense and brings peace to you in that time of death? And that's how I would bring all the traditions together, because that's what we all, as faith leaders, as communities of faith, want, is to bring peace and comfort and understanding of the next part of our journey beyond this earth.
It can't take me to the past. These dreams that I live were never supposed to last.